mention that it's a typical process for us to be able to record these meetings so that we have an accurate record. We make sure that all things that are captured during the meeting are communicated. So thanks for turning on the recording.
Thank you for the reminder. Yes.
Sure.
Again, if you're interested in hearing that recording, we do have it. Again, we covered, I think, some really good ground last week and really want to share our momentum with you. So thank you all for coming. I think you guys all know me, but my name is Denise, and I've been the governance lead for DFMDC now for about 5 weeks. I will be facilitating today's meeting like I did last time. I promise to use your time wisely. We will keep this to 1 hour. So for the agenda today, we're going to have some brief introductions. We're going to talk about the commercial model, and Mike and David are going to lead that discussion. I'll be talking about the governance agreement, and then we'll wrap it up with next steps. So Patrick, if you do not mind, I am going to ask you to just very brief introductions because not everyone was here on the last call.
Yeah, thank you, Denise, and thank you, Michael, and the DFM team to invite me. This is Patrick Duffy. I'm the president of the Blockchain and Transport Alliance. I know just about every name I see on this list, so I'm happy to spend some time with y'all. I think most people know BITA. BITA is working on open source and royalty-free data standards to help power blockchain-enabled commerce with a real focus on the supply chain and transportation processes. So happy to be involved in these conversations.
Thanks.
Always good to have you, Patrick.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for coming back. And Linda.
Hey, I'm Linda Goetze. I'm with the Blockchain Chamber of Commerce, leading that organization, and very happy to call DFM Data Corp one of the members of the chamber, and Michael and many on his team, friends as well. So definitely have a professional relationship.
I think we're all friends.
I think that is a fact.
I very much enjoy the caliber of people, Michael, that you have brought together, and it's a pleasure to be one of those people and to participate in what I believe is going to be really forming a new marketplace and supporting a new way of doing business that's going to be a net value add. So happy to be here.
Thanks for all your support, Linda.
Thanks, Linda. So I'm going to speak for GS1 and Hedera. They're both in purple. GS1 is not joining this meeting. They are interested in assisting the team. They were very helpful at the first meeting. They've identified some areas where they think they are the best fit. As a nonprofit standards body, of course, they have to be somewhat careful in participating in a for-profits. But specifically, as we launched the utilization working group, GS1 has indicated that that would be a very good fit for them. So we look forward to working with them then. And Hedera Hashgraph, again, they were at our 2-hour meeting last week. They also provided some direction and expertise, quite a bit of it, and have recommended Keith Lutsch, who's on this call, to help us craft the legal aspects of the governance agreement. So welcome, Keith. And if you don't mind, I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm primarily a patent lawyer, but I've been doing standards development work, as in developing standards organizations, since 1995. Started at Compaq and have continued ever since.
Thank you, Keith. And John.
John Greaves, standards and all related stuff around it. And a huge fan, despite earlier cryptic commentary, of Darden. Have a nice day.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John. And Raj, thank you again, and thank you for your attendance last time as well.
Oh, hi, this is Rajat. I'm one of the co-founders of Dextray. So we are a full-blown blockchain-powered logistics platform for brokers, carriers, and shippers. And freight matching is obviously a component of the platform, but there are other things that's also enabled by smart contract, including decentralized financing. So happy to be here and very interested in the concept and happy to help the team.
Thanks again for being here.
And from the DFMDC Team, I have not asked them to officially go through the introductions because everyone knows them, but of course we're joined by Michael Darden, Mike Turner, David Wolff, and Jeff Herle. And
Hello.
yes, so they're all here. And I might add, they're all wearing the shirts.
New shirts. Yeah, we figured that it's a virtual conference, so we might need to have matching golf shirts. So, David, thanks for pulling these together and getting the logo so it has the detail in it that it deserves, because it's cool. They came out really well. So, thanks for getting those pulled together.
Pleasure.
I presume mine is lost in the post.
So actually, we needed to double check the size for yours, sir. I didn't know where you were in your Beachbody cycle of things. So yeah.
Ouch! That's all I can say, John. Is a big ouch on that one.
As long as we can wear them like on the golf course physically next time we have a major meeting, I'm all in. I'll even wear a medium if you think, if that's what you got.
Well, we're actually looking to be able to get some women's cut shirts as well, because we wanted to be respectful of Denise's neutrality as well. So we're going to create a co-branded one for her that has her logo on the sleeve, so that we have an ability for her to have her representation as well, because we think the work that we're doing here is really going to be impactful for the future, and glad to have everybody that's been a part of it so far help bring it together.
I trust that DFM Data Core is not adopting gender divisive tactics here, are they?
No, just trying to be able to help satisfy the individuality of its members.
I think diversity is going to be a key component of our conversations, John. I'm looking forward to this.
And then, thank you guys for that. Finally, to wrap it up, Kurt.
Thanks, and I appreciate the inclusion, because if you're going to get golf shirts for everyone, I should be at the bottom of the
I heard you wanted.
My golf scores if you're going to be inclusive, I appreciate that.
Got it. And you like the hats too, don't you, Kurt? Yeah. Yeah, I lobbied for hats in the first round too, but we didn't get that to pass the muster.
You all look dapper. Nicely done.
Thank you.
I'm representing IBM as our blockchain leader for transportation and distribution. And like when the earth cooled, IBM is providing the core of the platform. And we also have DFM going through our mentorship program. So that's what I'm bringing. Thanks.
Thanks, Kurt.
Thanks, Kurt. And I'm going to hand it over to Mike to talk about the commercial model. And this was something that came up on the July 13th meeting by a couple of different people, Raj, Kurt, you guys specifically, that you needed to understand this better. So we said, okay, this is something we need to cover.
Thank you, Denise. Good to be with everyone. I'm going to cover, as Denise said, the next couple slides, and then David is going to also finish up in reference to the governing principles for the commercial model. If you look at the slide, we decided that we have a four-phase rollout. You see the dates of the phases as we go through them. And phase one, where we are completing this month, the first bullet point you see, especially in reference to the sweat equity that we put in place over the last time frame getting this done, is securing the rights to facilitate the proactive collaboration with the DFM matching providers. And ultimately, that's what sets the foundation for DFMDC, allowing us to move this forward, put us in a scenario we can actually do what we say we're going to do. We established the executive team. You met those individuals. Obviously, Denise is supporting us from a governance standpoint, and commissioning Grove Consulting to formulate the governance framework. We came to quick conclusion that this was a critical part of what we needed to do in order to ensure that as we're talking to the digital freight matching providers, that we absolutely understood, and they understood what our governance process was and how we're going to go about business. You all are part of the governing council that we're working to facilitate and form. And then we developed the initial technology platform, as Kurt referenced, from the IBM cloud process. So these are things that we've done, finishing those up this month. And we'll talk about phase two unless there's some questions here. Phase 2, funding source, DFM equity purchase and per load fee revenue. This is going into next month, August, through December 2020, over the next critical months of the year. And aligning with industry standard bodies, we think that still is an important aspect. We're working through that process now, as you all know. One of our key metrics that we want to do is establish 1 to 3 minimum viable ecosystems made up of 3 to 4 DFMs for a total 20 plus DFMs. So getting the MVP up, standing up, making sure it works, getting the right context so that we can ensure the process works. And through that, we can then work on how we purge phantom data from the member DFMs. As you recall, one of the things we referenced as part of our value proposition was that this settling of 40 to 6% phantom loads out there in the marketplace was something that most people had accepted. We certainly are not going to accept that, and we believe that we can, and we do have an ability to remove that from the system as we move forward. Facilitating new industry data analytics and cross-licensed data sources. So as we bring the ecosystem together, as we start to get more data, as we start to get a compilation of data information, we certainly want to be able to get some standard analytics from that process and be able to play that back to the participants and understand how we can evolve what might be new avenues of opportunity. I'll talk about that further as well. And then we need to continue to develop the features for the DFMDC technical platform. As we move into 2021 for the full year, this is phase 3 of our commercial model process. My forecast, as we think about getting the MVE up and running as standard, is that we're going to look to average 10 DFM per month being awarded. That means that the companies are working with us, we're working with them, they've gone through the processes we need to for them to be a part of the DFM Data Corp structure, and of course we're sharing data and sharing information. Enable cross-marketplace commerce and co-brokering functionality through established co-opetition. That to me is one of the key components as we move into 2021, where ultimately the marketplace process, DFMs working together, understanding this co-opetition. The analogy of a rising tide raises all boats comes to mind, and unless you're on the coast, that might not be a good thing to say, but nonetheless, the analogy works. There's a hurricane coming, so I need to be careful about that one. But nonetheless, the analogy works in reference to raising the tide, raising the awareness and understanding of this functionality to ensure the co-opetition works, and that way the digital freight matching marketplace process starts to grow. And that leads into bullet point 3, and that is the educational and marketing outreach and lead generation that we need to do. As we referenced before, less than 5% penetration in this full industry. There's a significant upside, and everyone we've talked to and some early discussions, we have to start the framing of what digital freight matching is. And if you recall, Jeff referenced the amount of articles that are now coming out in reference to that amount of context, and we see that continuing going forward. And then obviously collaborating with the industry to innovate, inspire, enable service functions and further capabilities to leverage DFM capability. So I just want to stop there to make sure that anyone has any questions about what we're doing in phase 3 through 2021.
Thanks, Mike. There's a little looming, which would be maybe in phase 2, what the pricing model definition might look like. Right, so you could really just start to model a few different scenarios. That could probably actually even be done in phase 1. We could, well, in a couple days, maybe move it to phase 2, which is model the different pricing, question mark.
And I think David's actually going to cover some of that.
Yeah, we're going to touch on kind of the high-level principles behind it and the intention for it to be collaborative to zero in on the exact way to do that.
Okay.
Great call out.
Otherwise, Mike, I don't have waterfront yet. I'm a couple houses up, but I do like the rising tides.
All right, thank you.
Bug's not red.
And then as we get into phase 4, DFM equity purchase and the per load fee revenue, our goal is to get to 95% of DFMs participating with the DFMDC commercial model. That obviously rolls into 2022. One would think as we get all these avenues up and running, we're starting to onboard the DFMs, we're getting collaboration, we're ensuring that we're driving the value and the connectivity points needed, that we want to get to that degree of concentration. And once you do so, you start to then get the ability to R&D and mine aggregated industry transactional data for new insights. Once you get that amount of concentrated information, we believe there are going to be insights, innovation, and other applications that we can do with this level of data that we will have available from all the DFMs participating. Deploying new functionalities and capabilities based on what the DFM industry wants. And David's going to talk about some of that as well, because we need to make sure that we're playing this back for the DFMs, because this whole ecosystem is designed to support the DFM. So we need to make sure we're getting in place what they're looking for that can help them grow and expand. And then the next 2 bullet points is a continuation of the marketing process, the lead generation, the outreach, the collaboration. None of that can stop. We need that to continue to unfold as we roll out our commercial model and drive toward interoperability associated with the DFMs participating. So those are the 4 phases that we've laid out. And it's aggressive in my mind, but doable, and one that we think is certainly applicable. And we're excited about being able to get to this point where we can actually start to talk about and leverage and communicate where we see our plan is from a commercial strategy. David?
Thanks, Mike. So we can have the next slide. So at the core of, this phase rollout, really, in phase 1, it isn't there as an explicit bullet, but it was to recognize and embrace the idea that this isn't going to happen without co-opetition, that the industry has to be wanting it, understanding it, craving it, and collaborating, cooperation between all these different companies is essential. And so that implied we have to be a neutral utility. So we understood as a foundational principle that this has to be based in standards, grounded in standards, led by the DFMs for the DFMs. So we intend to, throughout the the structure of our business model and throughout the idea of portraying this as a set of principles that will guide us and let us know whether we're making good decisions, relative to our mission. That it's about the group effort. And so you have the foundational, and then you have the structural. So it's number 1, governance driven and directed operations. So Jeff, as our VP of operations, he's going to keep his eye on the ball, and that we're not going to do anything without the explicit collaboration and endorsement of the community. And next is the big idea of shared equity and shared gain. I'm going to go into that, but the essential is that we believe that the DFMs, rightly so, should have skin in the game. And this is a for-profit venture, and there's a lot to be gained on all fronts beyond mere profits. And then equitable service fee as a principle. The fee. This is about the fee per load, is what we're referring to here. That would sort of pay for all of this. As a principle, we felt like we know enough about what's involved with all of this to say that this should be the guiding factors, and then collaboratively we'll come together on that. And then this idea of a win-win-win business model. The win-win-win is just referring to the DFMs as a group, as an industry, shippers and carriers as a group, and DFM Data Corp, that each have something particular to gain from this enterprise that really can't be gained without the formation of this enterprise. So going into it one by one, governance-driven and directed operations. So DFM Data Corp operates as a neutral utility in service to the DFM industry, with standard and governance at its core of how it functions, plans, makes decisions, and evolves. So we're speaking about this as where we came from and where we're going and how we're going to get there. It's all about focusing on the standards and governance. DFM Data Corp does not favor any one DFM, DFM type, or DFM market segment. We're using the word neutral, and we use it a lot, but this gets to the heart of what do we really mean by that? Neutral means we're here to serve, and we're not here to favor. Steering committee is, as a matter of structure, we agreed, is comprised of 11 voting members, an odd number. 6 of the 11 seats, the majority, are DFM company representatives. 2 are DFMDC representatives. 1 is a non-governance organization of one kind or another, perhaps academic. And then 2 standard bodies represented. So the basics. And then the idea, this big idea of shared equity and shared gain. So at the beginning of this thought is the idea to preserve the position of neutrality. As a company, we've adopted the policy of not accepting VC or PE funds. And so that introduces the idea, okay, so where are the funds coming from? DFM, I'll get to that, is a nonprofit, is a for-profit business. The industry will be allocating 10% of the equity base for the first 40 participants of DFM shares. So, and how that will work, we envision that the DFM will purchase their equity for $100,000 as a prerequisite to joining the Ecosphere, and in turn that replaces the need for VC or PE funds to take all of this to full implementation. And the stock units that we would issue to the DFMs provide the voting power over governance, 1 vote per company. So that's—
And David, if I could, before you go on, I think I want to back up just a little bit on point 1 for the team as well. We had a significant amount of healthy debate in reference to the strategy, and as you all know, 1.8 billion, the number that I saw recently of money that's been put into the digital freight matching process, and there's a significant amount of VE interest and PE interest in the space. But we came to this conclusion that in order for us to ensure that we remain neutral, we're not going to go that route. So ultimately, we need to move this forward in a way that allows us to operate, the DFMs coming into the ecosystem to operate collectively, so it is for the benefit of the digital freight matching companies and dry change, appropriate to how the governance process and the ecosystem looks to everyone to gain. I want to make sure that point was known again.
Yeah, I think Kurt had a comment as well.
You just triggered the idea, and Duffy and I are going back and forth too about DCSA, RailLink. Just RailLink.
Transplace was the one that Larkin came up with in my discussion with him. He was like, this has happened similarly before when you've got Schneider and these huge companies that all have overlapping brokerages, and they all came together and said, hey, this makes more sense if we just take all of our collective loads and all of our collective ability and do this so that we can, and they took a chunk and made an impact, but they didn't have the technological infrastructure to be able to scale beyond that and didn't have a desire to.
Okay. Yeah, good point. And yeah, good point about
this might be something that Keith, you might touch on a little bit, but is the technology going to inherently solve for some of the antitrust concerns that may arise from this model? I mean, when you're talking about 95% in phase 4 of the DFMs collaborating on the platform, is that something that y'all, I'm sure, are taking into consideration?
Yeah, that's actually part of what makes the antitrust possible. It gets past the antitrust is you're going to have a neutral or broadband group of people that are defining the underlying engine, the underlying system. That's what's going to make it neutral, and that's what's going to get past antitrust issues.
Okay, great, thanks.
It's a good point, though, Patrick, and yes, it definitely has come up.
It is, and it's one that we've
times.
had deep discussion about. I mean, it is clearly something that as an industry, when we look at this of how it could work together, there's that question comes up frequently, but the neutrality and the ability for us to say that we've built a platform that can be built on top of, based off of desires and interests from the working groups, makes it so that they're part of the steering and direction of what the technology build is.
The other big idea that feeds into the antitrust question and perhaps solves it is the fact that the net result of what we're doing through having all these companies come together and collaborate is making it better for the customer. So in antitrust issues, that's usually the thing that resolves it or triggers the fact. So if it's bad for the customer, it's an antitrust problem. But if it's good for the customer, it can resolve it.
But there will be, as part of the governance agreement, there will be an antitrust statement in language for certain.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Completely.
Thanks for adding that. That's absolutely correct.
Okay.
Okay, next slide. So item number 3, the equitable service fee. So this is, Kurt, your question from earlier. Let me just go through it. We're envisioning a per load fee. So that would mean that each time there's a booking as a result of a match and data needs to be purged, that's the reason it's being ported to us so that we can send a signal back for people to purge the consummated deal. There's a fee for that service, and it will be based upon like how we'll resolve what is an appropriate fee will be based upon balancing what the market will bear, the value gained from the service itself, the purging service and other services that bolt on to the core interoperability, and what is essentially what we believe and you guys should agree is fair compensation for DFM Data Corp's IP. The fee we envision being charged to the shipper. They're the net beneficiary, and that's the philosophy behind the notion of being charged to the shipper. It'll be added per load, either as a flat fee or as a percentage to be determined, whatever is people think is the best way to implement it. And member DFMs have the right to collect the per load fee, that being differentiated from those non-members who don't have the right to collect that fee. And then the idea of the win-win-win business model, it's the essential message that DFMs benefit, shippers and carriers benefit, DFM Data Corporation benefits. And so the way that the DFMs benefit is they gain equity in DFM Data Corp, becomes an asset on their books. Improved customer loyalty. So the essential of getting rid of phantom load and capacity data is an improvement in the customer experience, hence improved loyalty. Operational efficiency gains. So the essentials of removing phantom data also imply labor redundancies of chasing loads that don't exist and fixing loads that went awry. Those become resolved, and so there's operational efficiency gains. New data and analytics. So this new data set is going to be amazing to play with, and there's really open-ended benefits associated with that. And then the voting power of the governance, they own that power. So DFMs, that's their share. Shippers and carriers, so they see the flip side of the coin, a better customer experience, i.e. confidence that a given confirmed load is not going to be put on hold because of phantom data, and loads in general are going to confirm faster. It's a net improvement for the shippers and carriers. And for DFM Data Corp, it's compensation for the IP and our value-added services efforts we'll go to every day on your behalf.
I want to stop there before we go back into the governance. And I recognize that this is not unique, but it's a little different, and that it truly is a neutral platform that is being built, and it has this equity arrangement with the DFMs. Raj, as our resident DFM here, interested in understanding your thoughts on this particular.
Yeah, I just unmuted to say something. It's good that you caught me. Yeah, there's a couple of things here. One is you mentioned that we'll be able to pass this fee to broker or shipper. That's probably true. I wouldn't dispute that. The second thing is there are many of us, even like DexFreight, we don't charge per transaction. That model is slowly becoming very obsolete, and the VCs don't like that anymore. And so, I mean, we've decided not to charge on per transaction. It's mostly per subscription, assuming that they don't cross the threshold of processing X amount of shipments per month. So I would be very interested in knowing what that fee would be, and because we have our own estimation of how much does it cost to cover a transaction, because in our platform it's not only matching that we do a whole host of things, and so we would have to break that down into, okay, how much is it costing us to do the matching part. So I'd be interested to know, how you're going to come up with that fee, and then any if you guys need any help with that, I'm happy to provide it.
So we intend to derive the fee from, to go back to the description, balancing. I'm just reading what was in here again because it sets up what I'm going to answer, how I'm going to answer. Balancing what the market will bear, meaning how much is too much, how much starts to become not make sense to people. The value gained, so meaning there is going to be a quantifiable net gain in efficiencies and other forms of of betterment, right? And we should be able to quantify that. It's going to be different in different operations depending on the model, what kind of efficiencies are exactly gained.
Yeah.
And so we intend to gather that data, and it's on the table as part of the equation. And then on the fair compensation side, we can share when it's relevant, but there's ways of relating to the implied value of the IP itself. And that we tend to kind of not think about it on a daily basis. What's the value of the IP? We tend to more think about what's the value of our service, which is the previous point, but it really should be part of the equation as well. What's the value of the IP relative to all this? So that's how we're going to do it. The presumption is we'll be able to put the data in front of everyone to just mull it over. We also intend to consult, this came up in the last meeting, with shippers so that we get their point of view, as well as those operating TMSs, so that we get their point of view, because they're a source of, as the point you made in the last meeting, they're often the source of some of this data, this problem data.
Yeah, I think we will welcome your input as well. You made a couple of great points around how the VCs are looking at the transactional process, and that information should be taken into consideration. And we do want input in reference to how we decide to go forward. So I just want to make it known that we will welcome your input in how we decide to go forward.
Yeah, this is not an easy. This is not an easy answer to question. I mean, easy question to answer. I'm sorry. I just had lunch, so my brain is all fried, and I don't know. But again, it's been hard for us, so I'm sure you're going to encounter that issue as well. But just telling you that our experience has been that the per transaction model, even though it sounds easier, right? You pay for transaction, it sounds a lot easier to manage, but you may have a hard time going through the workflow and all that. There may be other models that you should look into.
And we're totally obviously open to all of that. One of the things that we have in our minds, but it's too early to I'm just going to say, we have this sentiment that we want the fee to become a profit center for you. We want the DFMs to see it as a way of deriving additional profit per load, if that's the way you calculate it, or if it's another way.
Yeah.
The idea is that it adds a new revenue stream and a new margin on that revenue stream that didn't exist before. And idealistically, we imagine that fee as something we split. So if the industry decided, just for the sake of discussion, that it should be $10, then DFM Data Corp would say, okay, then we'll take $5, and we'll split that fee with the industry.
Yeah. Okay.
If I may, a couple of things. One, Kurt put a little note on the chat about Railink. Railink is a cooperation amongst the rail operators to maximize train loads, and it also administers standard freight tariffs. I do not believe DFM is going to set rates of carriage between the provider and the shipper and whatever, and the carrier. So Railink, whilst it is in effect a maximization of capacity, it was brought about, of course, because we simply do not have enough train lines. Our locomotives are aged; they're from the Dark Ages, and the tracks are owned by different than the locomotives, which are owned by leasing companies and rolling stock operators and so on. So whilst Railink is an admirable achievement, it's a uniform tariff as well as uniform carriage. It's similar to, for instance, the North Atlantic Conference, where if you see a Maersk ship, and IBM, of course, have an excellent business going with Maersk in the blockchain world. If you see a Maersk ship, or any ship for that matter, in the port of Savannah, and you see all the different labels on the containers, without the conference, which had to satisfy certain antitrust principles, those ships would be running only with their own branded containers on board, and those without a shipping line would be buying slots on those ships at the time and place and volume that they have. It is, in fact, the freight in the containers and the container slots themselves are governed by a tariff that is agreed by the cooperators. So whenever you get, what I'm saying is, if you get challenged in the business world by, well, why can't we? The answer is because both of those people skirt antitrust on an almost hourly basis because they set tariff. We don't set tariff, we set space on a free to obtain basis and police the space allocation and redundancy. Thank you, that's it, I'll go back to sleep now.
So let me play antitrust lawyer a second here, right? We don't, Raj, we don't need to get, we do not want to hear, cannot hear anybody's internal numbers. That's like on the no, you can't ever do that list. Okay.
Brilliant, Keith. Yes, brilliant, Keith. Yep.
I mean, that's right. I cannot. That is so far past the bright line, so we can't do that, right?
And DFM. Sorry, Keith, but you got me excited, agitated there because you hit the button. We cannot ourselves in these meetings cannot talk about any particular DFM client, contractor, partner, and their results or equity or income or anything, nor can we discuss the agreement between a party and ourselves and what that commercial undertaking is, nor can we circulate it to any other party of the party. It's the classic Marx Brothers thing that I love from their movies, you know, where the party of the first party is the party of the third party, is the party of the fifth, and there is no party in it, right? It's a clip everyone should listen to, Keith, and I beg your pardon for stealing your more valid thunder.
So in that regard, the discussion about, oh, we do this as blocks rather than per transaction, that's completely fair. But to go much more detailed than that is a problem, because that's what we're not allowed to share, because, you know, you get into the whole market sharing and all that sort of stuff. That's the antitrust stuff you have to stay away from. Then the other thing is, from an antitrust standpoint, it is better to price this as cost to provide the service, i.e. run the servers, and an IP component, and maybe some other little value. The more neutral you get, the less you get into business model gains and stuff like that, the farther you are from antitrust issues.
So Keith, is interpreting what you just said, does that imply that DFM Data Corp just needs to say this is what we think the number is and lay it on the industry?
This could sort of be, like, I've been involved in patent pools and stuff like that. There's a negotiation that the parties do against to reach the number, right?
Okay.
This is a number, so the parties here theoretically could negotiate that, well, that we think we're overpaying for your number and so on and so forth, right?
Understood.
You can say, well, this is what we want, but everybody goes, well, that's, you know, that'll have a trouble and stuff like that. There's sort of some concerns there as well. We don't want to get too deep into it. Cost to run the server in this case is probably appropriate, because that's what you're reselling, is ultimately server time in the end, and programming time. So that actual cost data is probably fair game. You know, I have to feel this out as we go.
Understood.
And I think that's the point all along this,
yeah.
is the fact that we want to do that in a way that makes it so that it makes sense. It has to be a utility that identifies what the costs are, identifies what the elements are, and then facilitates this with full transparency to the industry, or else it won't work. It won't work legally. It won't work for adoption. But if we're truly genuine with the efforts of being able to enhance the digitization of this marketplace, we can make great strides together within the confines of how governance can work. And I went 42 minutes without talking. That doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, that was.
What was the over/under?
And I was going to say, Denise, I think you're covering this in the governance slide, right?
Yes, I am. Yeah. Thank you guys for that feedback. That's actually excellent.
Yeah, great conversation.
Wonderful conversation. So we're going to move forward. You just heard the commercial model, and I'm not going to go into this slide in any detail other than to sort of illustrate that there has been some detailed thinking of how the governance model, how this governance framework is going to underpin the DFMDC operations. So there is, we thought about it throughout all 4 phases, and it is something that we are taking seriously, because governance, this has to be something that is fair, transparent, information has to be accurate, and it has to be available for all. So again, I just wanted you to see that the governance is going to be working in lockstep with this utility. And then, so the next slide. So what have we accomplished? We have, since we last met on the 13th. So as you know, we've agreed to this 2-group governance model. We agreed to the roles and responsibilities at the last meeting of this 2 governance model. And we agreed to this 11-person steering committee and the makeup of that steering committee, and it is phased. It's critical to remember that 6 of these seats are reserved for the DFMs, and Raj, that is because the DFMs should have majority. That's the whole point, right? We're not done, obviously. We've got a lot more work to do. Some of this is in progress. The legal framework, we just had this discussion. Keith is here participating, and so that sort of speaks to the first bullet. We also heard, Raj, again, to your point, to consider shippers, carriers. We've had some of these discussions. This is in progress. Absolutely, there's a green and a social liability to this. These are conversations we are starting to take place and starting to have. The commercial and monetization model, point really, really well taken, which is the nuances around the fee structure. These need to be considered. So I've captured that as a key takeaway. And then finally, on the right-hand side, these are things that we have not tackled yet. They are on our radar. And this, again, is all feedback that we captured and communicated at the July 13th meeting.
So another issue would be, so if you have the 6 members DFMs, and let's say Dextrade is one of them, and then you go out and talk to another 20 DFMs, and then say, wait a minute, my competitor is in the group, and then will Dextrade be able to see the inner workings of how the shipments are being removed from the system? Will they be able to see how my shipments are being removed or added or whatever it is? You know what I'm saying?
I do.
So yeah.
I do.
So
yeah.
So that is something that needs to be cleared out, so that this concept can add more DFMs into the network.
Well, one of the guiding fundamentals in the technology, which we haven't gone into in any detail in our meetings so far, but is the idea of anonymity, so that the data itself is disguised and can't be discerned who your customers are and how you derive your profits, etc.
Sure.
So we can go into more detail on that, and I think part of what you're talking about will resolve that way. But clearly, everybody getting together in the room and talking is another whole side of it.
And I think there's so there's 2 parts. There's the operational security of the data, right? And that is, what do we keep on and off chain, and the fact that it's anonymous. That's on the operational side. On the governance side, for BITA, and Patrick knows this, there's FedEx and DHL and UPS. And UPS and FedEx are part and parcel of the same board. There's a lot of concern about how much information is shared. So there's also a model to secure this information from a governance perspective, as well as the fact that it's anonymous. Patrick, did you want to say anything to that point? Because I know this comes up from BITA.
It's something that we're only really going to get into now that we're pushing into this implementation technical committee. But it's certainly something that we have long considered as a hurdle that we're going to have to overcome. We're just only now getting towards actually realizing how we might have to work through those challenges.
So the initial thought, Patrick, if I could just chime in for 1 second, we've looked at this, and in our first meeting, we showed these, 85 steps that are broken down in basically 8 different chapters or sections of what takes place. But if we had full transparency and full interoperability between the digital freight matching marketplaces, we'd be asking for Raj and every other digital freight matching company to disclose what all of those different steps were. And not everybody captures all of those steps. There's really 5 of them that are the primary steps that enable the first levels of interoperability. So our objective from a business model concept and why we're thinking the steering committee approach works best is to be able to have simple alignment on what those 5 key elements are that the industry can look at and see if they can all call them the same things and gain this initial benefit of this clearinghouse. And as they see the benefit from that, the industry itself will say, well, wait a minute, if we can share these 5 and we've proven our trust of doing that, let's add these 3. And then you build the trust and infrastructure from the participants that are engaged in the governance and the development strategy of the technology. And that's also what keeps us out of trouble with the antitrust side. So it's really why it makes good sense for the organization to be led forward by the DFMs, because it's truly here to benefit the DFMs.
And the 5 allow us to purge that first level of data for the phantom loads and phantom carriers.
Yeah, and that's really the anonymity side. I think that's right, Jeff, is the fact that the reason why we're trying to be able to create these minimum viable ecosystems of participants is so there is enough density of their information so that there's no possible way to deduce from the data set what somebody else has.
We have to do that, or it's a non-starter.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of the governance that everybody's going to agree to and say, well, that's how it has to be. That's the foundation.
Okay, guys, so in interest of time, I'm going to move forward. We have one last slide, and this one is important. So we've heard some excellent feedback. We're going to incorporate, like we did the last time, we'll incorporate this feedback into the next governance agreement, right, in the commercial model as well. And we are going to move forward with the steering committee. We have approval, as you know, from the last meeting to have a 3-person steering committee, which we have nominated. Myself as the governance lead here, Linda, Jeff, and John. John represents IEEE and is neutral. Jeff is on the DFMDC board, VP of Ops. And Linda is the DFMDC recording secretary, but also wears the blockchain chamber hat. Incoming guys, you're gonna have a meeting invite. You didn't know about this, but it's July 29th. We'll see if that works. So that's next week. And I do have a proposed agenda for you guys to consider. And I will be participating as well, obviously, because I'm working from the governance perspective. And certainly the intent is to keep this, again, transparent. So all meeting proceedings and minutes will be publicly available at the wiki page so people can see it, as well as the recordings, obviously. And again, to the 3-person, thank you in advance for your participation. And then we are working, and this next one is critical as well. So this governance framework that we discussed last week, right, with your input, has turned into a more robust governance agreement, which it absolutely must, we must have. It's going to include some of the normal things that you see in a governance agreement, like, meetings, quorums, terms of members, et cetera, but also the bylaws, IP rights, and this is the confidentiality, the license agreement, it's anti-compete, antitrust, copyright. In order for us to meet our goal, which is by the end of August, have 1 to 3 MVEs, certainly that members stood up so that we can demonstrate the viability of the DFMDC utility. So, and then finally, we'll have a DFM, this will be specific to the DFMs, but an industry consortium kickoff is planned for mid to late September, and that's, Raj, where we plan to bring the DFMs on board as well. But we have work to do, we know that, on the governance space, on the operational space, but we're in good shape, actually.
Yeah, you can count on us for the MBE.
Oh, that'd be brilliant.
Awesome.
That's excellent.
That's so great to hear.
Great.
Good to hear.
Thank you, Raj. That's great to hear. Appreciate your commitment for our success going forward. It's got such a great opportunity, and you've been a pleasure to work with since our first meeting. So I really enjoy your input.
And it was really your input at the very beginning that really made us realize governance has to be front and center.
And personally, I think then they, because now I'm on board. So let me ask.
I remember one of the first chats just quickly that Jim and Michael and myself had, and just having the follow through over the months to this point is just fantastic. So it's really wonderful to see. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Linda.
A question to the non-DFMDC leadership team. So to everyone else, do you believe that this commercial model and the governance structure, that the governance model that we have lined up is advisable for this commercial model? Do you feel like there's any major gaps?
I don't. This is Rajat. I don't. I think this is a work in progress. Obviously, there's a lot of work to be done. And also, we need to look at the technical side of it, but that's just that's just one aspect of solving this issue of clearing the shipments.
Thanks for that, Raj. John Greaves, any thoughts? And the question, I'll re-ask the question is this governance structure appropriate for the commercial model, or do you think there's any gaps?
I am so comfortable with this that I'm actually going to sleep on it.
Because I know you would tell me, actually, John. I have no fear about that. Kurt, anything from your perspective?
It's just the evolution, the ability to make changes to this. Right now it feels fluid. As it gets more codified, have the ability to make sure that it's easy to make changes.
Okay, thank you for that.
Excellent point.
Yeah, I agree. I'm capturing this as well. Patrick.
I'm excited about what I've seen so far. I think, time will tell. Definitely encourage with Rajat's enthusiasm about moving forward. And I think that's an important early step, is to have that kind of anchor tenant, as you might call it, to go out there and start getting some feedback from other DFMs, see how it moves forward.
I can share one minor update if we wanted to, Denise, just because we got a few minutes left before we close up the meeting. But there isn't.
Before we do, Michael, I want to ask.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask Keith that same question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were through with the feedback piece. I apologize.
Oh, no.
I'm still working through this. I have to based on this phone call, I'm going to cogitate how the patent pools work and how much of that is analogous to this as well. I think there's more analogies than I originally would have suspected. So I sort of have to play all of that together, because patent pools are actually for-profit entities as well, but there's a tremendous amount of anonymization. Nobody knows how many anybody sold, and nobody knows the internal dollars that are operating, which sound like they're a problem here as well. And so some of the way the pools work may be somewhat relevant as well. So I think we're probably fine. I just have to sort of mull it over.
Okay.
Thanks for being on the call to listen, Keith.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And Linda, did you have anything to add? I want to make sure we have your voice as well.
Yeah, no, I was just wanting to echo what was said by Kurt in creating the infrastructure for governance to make sure that there is the ability to make changes that are appropriate as the ecosystem evolves over time. And that's something that we've seen with different blockchains, you know, kind of getting a little bit stuck. If we have the flow and the continued purpose to work collectively to support the whole industry and build it in to be able to be flexible, I think that's going to be really vital moving forward because of the shift that's going to happen as the technologies continue to evolve. We're just going to need to keep that in consideration as we go forward.
Good point.
Sense.
Okay, Michael, you have a minute.
Well, thanks. All I was going to say is that we've been in discussions with one of the state's Department of Transportation, and that state has interesting data that they are interested in being able to facilitate some of the interoperability with, and it's emerging and evolving as far as an opportunity that might look like an ecosystem that could stand on its own that was state-based, and it's unfolding like an opportunity that might make sense for repeating, where other industry associations or affiliations where like-minded folks have come together before that have a collection of DFMs, they can become a catalyst for that starting ecosystem to take place. So just something that we're seeing in the early discussions of the people that we're talking with, and where it's leading of how these ecosystems may come together in an equilibrium and a balance for their starting points.
Excellent. That is very good news. So guys, it is 2. I promised to keep you for an hour. So thank you again. You'll see minutes come out. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, please, you know how to reach me. Well, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks
everyone.
for keeping us on time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Denise.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
You too.
Thanks,
Thanks
everyone.
everybody.
Thank you.